Pioneer, a format that for many has felt left over and forgotten, now demands we survey its potential. A format dominated by cards like Winota, Joiner of Forces, and is it any wonder she is among the top decks? Notice Magali Villeneuve's commanding depiction of the warrior herself, a hero among beasts, a trailblazer in a format defined by exploration. But Winota is not the only deck that leads.
Sam?
Stephen Belladin's Yorion the Sky God is a spire in the clouds. It soars above the other decks of the format. Its place among top 8 lists is indebted to Belladin's gentle and effervescent employment of oil paint. It's wispy.
Sam?
Professor?
You're doing the video wrong. This is supposed to be a list of the best new cards from New Capenna for Pioneer.
I mean, that's a little BuzzFeedy for me, but I suppose I can speak about which cards have the most moving illustrations so that people know which decks are going to be the strongest, sure.
No, you've got that backwards. The cards aren't powerful because of their art. The cards have great art if they happen to be the ones that are powerful.
Right. We call that the Tarmogoyf question in the Academy.
You may be a bit overeducated for this role. What I need is a budget Ristic Studies, someone who's still very smart, but a lot more willing to debase themselves.
Hello, spicy people of the internet. Spice 8-Rack here, and many Magic the Gathering players ask the question, if Pioneer deck lists were Marxist philosophers, which ones would they be? Now, not unlike how Antonio Gramsci interrogated the idea of hegemony and laid the foundation for our modern understanding of critical theory, Mono Black Aggro asks the question, if I just keep playing Rankle Prankle all the time, will at some point it become a good Magic card?
How is this budget me? How is this budget Ristic Studies?
Well, you're both highly educated essayists with multiple degrees.
Yeah, multiple degrees of separation from stipends and tenure
and employment.
Hurtful. And boy howdy, I wish I had the financial security to really call you up on that.
All right, I'm just gonna have to do this myself. Watch a master at work as I present to you a Tolarian Community College listicle, or as I call it, a tisticle.
I have a master's too.
Lands capable of producing more than a single color of mana have been the bread and butter of competitive formats since the beginning. And lands that can produce more than 2 colors of mana are particularly powerful, especially when you can fetch them. However, in the Pioneer format, there are no fetch lands. So given that is the case, just how useful are the 3-color cycling lands, or triomes, as they were called on Ikuria? That's a good question, which is why I asked it. Now I'd like to answer it. Many of the top decks in the Pioneer metagame use only 1 or 2 colors, including Izzet Phoenix and Azurius Control. But just as many use 3 or more. Do these decks use Ikuria triomes? Well, some do, but hardly all of them. Certainly in 3+ color Jeskai Ascendancy decks, one finds some triomes, but in decks that are lower to the ground, such as Mardu Greasefang, lands that enter untapped are of a much higher priority. Perhaps most telling is the lack of triomes in many of the top Lotus combo decks, which are very color intensive with cards like Emergent Ultimatum, and seem like the ideal place to put lands that fix your colors. And yet they forgo the triomes. Or if they do show up, it's often only as a one of. All that said, there are several decks that may be interested in the new half of the cycle. Naya mid-range decks, which are centered around Winota, Joiner of Forces, and Jund Sacrifice decks may very well have places for the new triomes in their colors, but only time will tell. The triomes are still powerful cards, but where they belong in Pioneer seems as yet obscure. And I almost didn't even give them this honorable mention. But what do we know we'll see play in Pioneer? Well, coming in at number 5, it's Obscura Charm. For a white, a blue, and a black, we get an instant that can, in typical Charm fashion, do one of 3 things. Return target multicolored permanent with a mana value of 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, counter target instant or sorcery spell, or destroy target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. As fun as it will be to get rid of that pesky Narset, Parter of Veils, or thwart a game-winning Temporal Trespass, it is that first ability that really interests me. Greasefang, Okiba Boss, is the center of two decks in the current metagame, and while Mardu Greasefang is certainly the stronger of the two at the moment, Obscura Charm may be just what Esper Greasefang needs to take the lead in this rat race. The only knock against Obscura Charm is its relatively narrow appeal, but it is so useful in that particular place, I felt it had to make the list. A card that both protects and enables a combo is always something to be considered, and Obscura Charm does just that. Coming in at number 4 is Giada, Font of Hope. For a single generic in a white, you get a flying, vigilant 2/2 that both buffs your other angels and can tap for mana, so long as you spend it on casting an angel spell. Selesnya Angels is an extremely fun tier 2 deck that has been looking for just the thing to push it to the top tier. Will Giada, Font of Hope, be that card? Maybe. It could probably use something else too, but Giada, Font of Hope, is a great start in the journey towards that lofty goal. There are several mid-range strategies in the top tier of the Pioneer metagame, but as far as I'm concerned, there is always room for more. Giada, Font of Hope, is no slouch on her own either. A 2/2 flyer will get some damage in early on, and that vigilance means she can block Arc-like Phoenix. You know, the flyer that can appear out of nowhere. If you do play Giada, Font of Hope, be sure to pick up some Resplendent Angels. Wait a minute, Resplendent Angel is a $25 card? Hashtag reprint Resplendent Angel. Write a letter to Gavin. Gavin! Coming in at number 3, Thrag Tusk is back, baby. Or, well, something similar to it. Workshop Warchief is a 5/3 Rhino Warrior with Trample. When Workshop Warchief enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life. And when it dies, you get a 4/4 green Rhino Warrior creature token. Yep, that is very Thrag Tusk-esque. Certainly the mana cost is a little more restrictive, requiring 2 green mana instead of 1, but that hardly seems like a real impediment. On top of all this, it has the new Blitz ability for 4 generic and 2 green mana that allows it to enter the battlefield with haste, allows you to draw a card when it dies, and requires you to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. That extra bit of card draw is pretty sweet. Workshop Warchief likely has a home in Naya Winota, but with abilities like that, I'm willing to bet it will find a home in some new strategies and may even help pull some lower tier decks up the ladder. So what are the 2 best cards for Pioneer from New Capenna? Well, of all the new mechanics from Streets of New Capenna, one in particular stands out as better than the rest. Casualty. When you cast a spell with Casualty, you may sacrifice a creature with power greater than or equal to its casualty number, and if you do, you get to copy that spell. This makes spells with Casualty very difficult to counter outright, and especially when strapped to a counter spell like Make Disappear. Make Disappear is a blue instant for 1 and a blue that counters a spell unless that spell's controller pays 2 mana. It has Casualty 1 as well, meaning if you have a creature with a power of at least 1 to sacrifice, you can counter either 2 spells, or more likely, counter 1 spell unless its controller pays 4 mana, an insurmountably steep cost. I can easily see this card taking the place of a negate in many a sideboard and even some main decks. Where it really shines is in matches against Izzet decks, nullifying the power of Galvanic Iteration. And I feel strongly this will be one of the few cards that can seriously tangle with other powerful Casualty spells in the future. After all, why endure something you could just make disappear? So what's the best card from New Capenna for the Pioneer format? Well, what would a modern Magic the Gathering set be without a powerful 3-mana Planeswalker? That's right, my number 1 pick is Aub Nixlas the Adversary. For 1 generic, a red and a black, you get a 3 loyalty Planeswalker that deals damage unless your opponents discard a card, creates a devil token, and if you can get to 7 loyalty, draws you 7 cards. 7 loyalty, huh? That seems steep. Ho ho ho! But Aub Nixlas the Adversary has a 4th ability, Casualty X. When you cast Aub Nixlas the Adversary, you may sacrifice a creature of any power, and if you do, you get to create a non-legendary copy of Aub Nixlas the Adversary with loyalty equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Alright, so if I sacrifice my Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, that puts old Aub Nix at 6 loyalty to start with. Oh baby, Rakdos Midrange and Jund Sacrifice will be all too happy to add this bad boy to their teams. wings. But it is in Rakdos Anvil where Aub Nixlas will get to really spread his evil wings. The effect of Aub Nixlas the Adversary on the Pioneer metagame is a matter to watch closely, and I suspect he'll be making quite the splash. I only hope he is more a Narset Parter of Veils than an Oko Thief of Crowns, but in the end, only time will tell. Special thanks and shout out once again to Crew 3 Podcast for their help in developing this script. If you're looking for an awesome Pioneer podcast, I will include links in this video's description.
Wow, Professor, you sure have taught me a lot today about what the best decks in the Pioneer format are.
Cards! The best cards!
Well, when you tell me!
Ricordatevi di mettere like e lasciate i vostri pensieri nei commenti laggiù e ovviamente dovete iscrivervi al canale YouTube di Tolarian Community College. Grazie di vedere il video. Ciao.
That's perfect. Wow, look at how cheap fetch lands are getting. I could really use a bunch for all my Simic Commander decks.
Well, then get a box of Modern Horizons too.
But that's $275. A playset of Misty Rainforests is $120.
But the box could have a ton of fetch lands in it, and if you crack all the fetch lands you need and sell everything else from the box, it's like you didn't even pay for them.
Yeah, but...
It's like you didn't even pay for them.
Need anything?
He'll take a box. So how many did you get?
2. An Arid Mesa and a Marsh Flats.
Well, you can trade those 2 in for a Misty Rainforest.
I need 4 Misty Rainforests.
Better buy another box.